Thanks for everything, Marcus. We're restructuring the department, and your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. My name is Marcus Thompson, 38 years old, and until that Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m., I was a senior account manager at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions in Denver, Colorado. For exactly 11 years and 3 months, I've been the backbone of our client services department. The woman delivering my pink slip was Sarah Chun, my new boss of exactly 3 weeks and 1 day. The same person I just finished training on every single one of my client accounts. I nodded once, closed my laptop, and said, "I understand." No argument, no pleading, no scene. Just quiet acknowledgement. Sarah's expression was a mixture of relief and something that looked almost like satisfaction. Behind her, Vanessa from HR shifted uncomfortably in her chair, unable to make eye contact. She'd processed my paperwork for every promotion, every performance review, every bonus I'd earned over the past decade. Now she was processing my termination. As I packed my personal items, I could feel the entire office watching. 23 employees, most of whom I'd trained at some point during their careers here. Jennifer from reception looked like she was about to cry. Mike from the design team shook his head in disgust. But I kept my composure, methodically placing family photos, my coffee mug, and the small plant my daughter Emma had given me for my birthday into a cardboard box. What none of them knew, what Sarah certainly didn't know, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for the past 2 weeks. Not because I'm psychic, but because I've learned to read the signs. And Sarah Chun had been broadcasting her intentions louder than a fire alarm. I started at Pinnacle when it was a scrappy 15-person agency operating out a converted warehouse near downtown Denver. Fresh out of college, hired as a junior account coordinator for $32,000 a year, plus the promise of learning the business from the ground up. The company had exactly 12 clients, mostly small local businesses who needed help with basic marketing, but couldn't afford the big agencies. My job was simple: keep the client happy, help them grow, and maybe we'd all survive long enough to build something meaningful. 11 years later, Pinnacle had grown to 150 employees across 3 offices. Our client roster included Fortune 500 companies, regional healthcare systems, and tech startups that had become household names. My personal portfolio had grown from those original 12 accounts to 47 active clients, generating $4.2 million in annual revenue. I wasn't just an account manager anymore. I was a relationship architect who'd built bridges between our agency and some of the most demanding clients in the region. But success creates its own problems. 3 months ago, our CEO announced that Pinnacle was being acquired by Meridian Global, a massive holding company that specialized in optimizing creative services businesses. Corporate speak for squeezing every drop of efficiency out of agencies like ours. The first sign of change came when they brought in Sarah Chun as the new VP of Client Services, my new boss. Sarah arrived with an impressive resume: Harvard MBA, 5 years at McKinsey, most recently a director role at a competing agency in Chicago. She wore designer suits, spoke fluent corporate buzzword, and had very clear ideas about modernizing our antiquated approach to client management. During her first week, she scheduled one-on-one meetings with every account manager to assess our methods and identify opportunities for improvement. Our meeting lasted exactly 43 minutes. I remember because I cleared my entire afternoon, expecting a thorough discussion about my clients, their needs, and how we might serve them better. Instead, Sarah spent the first 20 minutes explaining her vision for data-driven client relationship optimization. She used phrases like scalable engagement protocols and metric-based satisfaction indicators, while I tried to explain that my clients valued personal attention and industry expertise over automated check-ins and satisfaction surveys. "The problem with your approach, Marcus," she said, reviewing my client files on her tablet, "is that it creates unhealthy dependency relationships. Clients become too attached to individual team members instead of trusting our company's systems and processes. It's not scalable, and frankly, it puts us at risk if something happens to key personnel." I tried to explain that many of my clients had specifically requested to work with me, that their contracts included provisions about account management continuity, that some relationships had been built over 8 or 9 years of consistent service. Sarah dismissed these concerns with a wave of her hand. Contracts can be restructured, she said confidently. Client expectations can be managed. What we need is a more professional, systematic approach that doesn't rely so heavily on individual personalities and relationships. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Not because Sarah was wrong about everything, but because she was wrong about the most important thing. In the marketing business, especially at our level, relationships aren't just important, they're everything. Clients don't hire agencies, they hire people. They trust individuals, not companies. And after 11 years of building those relationships, one conversation at a time, I become the human face of Pinnacle Marketing for 47 different businesses. 2 weeks after that meeting, Sarah announced that she wanted me to train her personally on all my client accounts. Knowledge transfer, she called it. A comprehensive handover of client histories, preferences, decision-making processes, and relationship dynamics. She wanted to understand not just what we did for each client, but how we did it and why it worked. I should have seen the writing on the wall. But honestly, I thought she was trying to become a better manager. Maybe she wanted to understand our methods before implementing changes. Maybe she was planning to use my approach as a model for other account managers. I was optimistic, even excited about the possibility of mentoring someone with her credentials and background. For 3 weeks, I gave Sarah everything. Complete client files, contact information for key decision-makers, detailed notes about preferences and pet peeves, historical context for every relationship, and insights that couldn't be found in any formal documentation. I explained why Margaret Chin at Hartwell Industries preferred morning meetings and hated PowerPoint presentations, why David Rodriguez at Mountain View Medical needed at least 48 hours to review any proposal before making decisions, why the team at Apex Technologies responded better to casual emails and formal presentations. I shared stories that illustrated each client's personality and business culture, like the time I drove through a blizzard to attend Hartwell's emergency board meeting, when their previous agency had dropped the ball on a critical product launch, or how I'd spent my own weekend helping Mountain View Medical prepare for a regulatory audit because their compliance deadline had been moved up unexpectedly. These weren't just professional obligations. They were the foundation of trust that had taken years to establish. Sarah took detailed notes, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the nuances of each relationship. She even accompanied me to several client meetings, observing how I interacted with different personalities and adapted my communication style to match their preferences. I thought I was doing exactly what a good mentor should do, preparing my new boss to support our clients effectively. The warning signs were subtle at first. During our training sessions, Sarah would occasionally make comments about relationship dependency and client attachment issues. She questioned why certain clients required so much personal attention, suggesting that we might be enabling unrealistic expectations instead of setting appropriate boundaries. When I explained that some clients had been through multiple agencies before finding us, and that personal service was often the differentiating factor that kept them loyal, she nodded politely, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. The bigger red flag came during our final training session, the day before I was fired. Sarah asked detailed questions about contract terms, specifically clauses related to account management and service delivery. She wanted to know which contracts included personnel change notifications, which clients had the right to approve account team changes, and which agreements included early termination options for service modifications. At the time, I thought she was being thorough, maybe preparing for contract renewals or planning to propose service upgrades. I answered every question honestly, even explaining how I negotiated certain clauses to protect both our agency and our clients. Many of my contracts included key personnel provisions that required 30-day notifications if their primary account manager changed, along with 60-day transition periods to ensure continuity of service. These seem like unusual contract terms, Sarah observed, scanning through the documents. Most agencies maintain flexibility around staffing assignments. I explained that these clauses had been specifically requested by clients who'd been burned by other agencies. They wanted assurance that their account wouldn't be handed off to junior staff or managed by someone who didn't understand their business. In exchange of these commitments, they'd agreed to longer contract terms and higher retainer fees. It was a win-win arrangement that had generated millions in reliable revenue over the years. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, but something in her expression made me uncomfortable. She was looking at these contracts like a lawyer examining legal loopholes, not like an account manager planning to honor long-term client relationships. I should have trusted my instincts, but I was still operating under the assumption that we were on the same team. That night, I went home to my small house in Lakewood, where I'd been raising my daughter Emma as a single father for the past 6 years. At 14, she was smart enough to notice when something was bothering me, but I tried to keep work stress separate from our home life. Over dinner, she asked about my day, and I found myself explaining the basics of the training process without mentioning my growing concerns about Sarah's approach. "So you taught your new boss everything you know?" Emma asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "That's what good team players do," I replied. "When someone new joins a company, you help them succeed." Emma considered this for a moment. "But what if they don't want you to succeed?" The question caught me off guard. My 14-year-old daughter had identified the possibility that I'd been trying to ignore. What if Sarah wasn't planning to build on my relationships with clients? What if she was planning to replace me with them? That night, I lay awake thinking about Emma's question and reviewing everything that had happened over the past 3 weeks. Sarah's focus on contract terms, her comment about relationship dependency, her questions about which clients might be most adaptable to change. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. But I also realized something else. During those 3 weeks of training, I hadn't just given Sarah information about my clients. I'd also learned quite a bit about her approach, her priorities, and her blind spots. While she'd been evaluating my methods, I'd been unconsciously evaluating hers. And what I'd observed was encouraging. Sarah's previous experience had been with larger corporate clients who expected formal processes and systematic approaches. She'd succeeded in environments where client relationships were managed through account teams rather than individual relationships, where decisions were made based on data analytics rather than personal trust, where contracts were enforced through legal departments rather than honored through mutual respect. She had no experience with the kind of entrepreneurial, relationship-driven clients that made up the majority of my portfolio. Clients who chose agencies based on personal connections, who value flexibility and responsiveness over formal procedures, who expected their account managers to understand their business well enough to anticipate problems before they became crises. More importantly, Sarah seemed to view these relationship-dependent clients as problems to be solved rather than assets to be protected. She saw my personal connections as inefficiencies in the system rather than competitive advantages that had taken years to develop. Her entire approach was built on the assumption that clients could be transferred like files in a computer system, that loyalty was a function of service delivery rather than personal trust. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, typical March weather in Denver. I got to the office early, as usual, and spent the first hour reviewing client schedules and preparing for the day ahead. Hartwell Industries had a quarterly review meeting scheduled for Thursday. Mountain View Medical was expecting a proposal revision by Friday. Apex Technologies wanted to discuss expanding their digital advertising budget for the second quarter. Normal client work, the kind of steady relationship management that had been my specialty for over a decade. I had no idea that in 2 hours, none of these clients would be my responsibility anymore. At 9:45, Sarah's assistant knocked on my office door. "Sarah would like to see you in conference room B," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Vanessa from HR will be joining you." Conference room B was a small meeting space we use for confidential discussions, performance reviews, disciplinary meetings, sensitive client conversations. The fact that HR was involved told me everything I needed to know before I walked through the door. I gathered my laptop and notebook, walked down the hallway past colleagues who suddenly seemed very interested in their computer screens, and knocked on the conference room door. Sarah and Vanessa were already seated, documents spread across the table between them. "Marcus, please sit down," Sarah said, her voice professionally neutral. "We need to discuss some organizational changes." I sat down across from them, noting the termination paperwork that Vanessa was trying to keep discreetly hidden beneath her portfolio. No surprises here, just a final confirmation of what I'd started to suspect days earlier. As you know, Meridian Global is implementing efficiency improvements across all our portfolio companies, Sarah began, reading from prepared notes. After careful analysis of our client services department, we've identified opportunities to streamline operations and reduce redundancies. Corporate speak for firing people, but I let her continue. Your position as senior account manager is being eliminated as part of this restructuring. We'll be redistributing your client responsibilities among our existing team members, supported by new systems and processes that will improve overall service delivery. She slid a document across the table. This outlines your severance package, which is quite generous considering the circumstances. 2 weeks' pay plus accrued vacation time, and we'll provide positive references for your job search. I scanned the document quickly, noting the standard non-disclosure and non-compete clauses, neither of which would actually prevent me from working in the industry. Then I looked up at Sarah, who was watching my reaction carefully. "I understand," I said simply. "When do you need me to clear out my office?" Sarah seemed surprised by my calm response. She probably expected anger, arguments, maybe even threats. Instead, I was giving her the same professional courtesy I'd give any client who decided to terminate our services. "By the end of the day," she replied, "we'll be making announcements to staff and clients tomorrow." I stood up, shook hands with both of them, and walked back to my office to begin packing. As I loaded my personal items into boxes, I thought about those 47 client relationships I'd spent 11 years building. Relationships that Sarah apparently believed could be transferred like items on a balance sheet. She was about to learn the difference between managing accounts and managing relationships, the difference between handling clients and understanding them, the difference between reading about people in files and actually knowing them as human beings. I finished packing at 4:30 p.m., said goodbye to my colleagues without revealing what had happened, and walked out of Pinnacle Marketing for what I assumed would be the last time. In my car, I sat for a moment looking back at the building where I'd spent most of my adult professional life, where I'd learned my craft, where I'd built something meaningful. Then I drove home to have dinner with my daughter and start planning the next chapter of my career. What I didn't know yet was that the next chapter would involve watching Sarah discover exactly what she'd thrown away, and why some things in business can't be replicated through systems and processes. Some things, it turns out, are built on trust. And trust, once broken, has a way of revealing who really deserves it. The first call came on Thursday morning at 7:23 a.m., 2 days after my termination. Margaret Chin from Hartwell Industries, my biggest client worth $1.2 million annually. I was sitting in my kitchen, coffee in hand, scrolling through job postings when my personal cell phone rang. "Marcus, thank God you answered." Margaret's voice was tense with frustration. "I just got off the phone with your replacement, and I need to understand what's happening at Pinnacle. This Sarah person seems to think she can completely restructure our quarterly review process with 1 day's notice." I took a careful sip of coffee before responding. "Margaret, I'm no longer with Pinnacle as of Tuesday. Any questions about your account should be directed to Sarah Chun, who's taken over client services." "You're not with Pinnacle anymore?" Margaret's voice rose an octave. "What do you mean? You've been our account manager for 8 years. You know everything about our business, our challenges, our goals. How can they just replace you?" I explained the situation professionally, without criticizing Sarah or Pinnacle. Corporate restructuring, position elimination, standard business decision. But Margaret wasn't buying the corporate speak. "This is unacceptable," she said firmly. "Our contract specifically requires notification when key personnel changes are made to our account. We have a 30-day review period to evaluate new arrangements." "Did Sarah mention that during your conversation?" She hadn't, but I wasn't surprised. Sarah probably didn't fully understand the contractual implications of my departure. She'd been focused on the operational aspects of taking over my accounts, not the legal protections I negotiated to protect both the clients and the agency. "You should discuss that with Sarah directly," I replied diplomatically. "I'm sure she'll work with you to ensure a smooth transition." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Satisfaction because Margaret clearly valued our working relationship. Concerned because I could already see how this was going to unfold for Sarah, and it wasn't going to be pretty. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. David Rodriguez from Mountain View Medical, my second largest client at $780,000 annually. Marcus, I just heard some disturbing news about changes at Pinnacle. Please tell me it's not true that you're no longer handling our account. The conversation followed the same pattern. Shock, confusion, anger at not being notified properly, and pointed questions about contractual obligations. David reminded me that Mountain View's contract included a 60-day transition period for any account management changes, during which they could terminate without penalty if they weren't satisfied with the new arrangements. By noon, I'd received 7 calls from different clients, all expressing various levels of concern about my departure and their lack of confidence in the transition process. I maintained professional boundaries in every conversation, but I could hear the frustration building. These weren't just business relationships. They were partnerships built on 8, 9, even 10 years of consistent service, personal attention, and genuine understanding of each client's unique needs. That afternoon, Emma came home from school to find me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, surrounded by notes and coffee cups. "Job hunting?" she asked, dropping her backpack by the door. "Something like that." I replied, "How was school?" She studied my face with perceptive eyes of a teenager who'd learned to read adult emotions. "You don't look worried about finding a new job. You look like you're waiting for something." Smart kid. I was waiting, though I hadn't fully admitted it to myself yet. Waiting to see how Sarah would handle the growing client concerns. Waiting to see if Pinnacle's leadership would recognize the mistake they'd made. Waiting to see if the relationships I'd built over a decade would survive being transferred to someone who fundamentally misunderstood their value. The answer started becoming clear on Friday morning when Jennifer from Pinnacle's reception desk called my personal phone. "Marcus, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but things are getting crazy here," she whispered. "Sarah's been in emergency meetings all morning. 3 clients called demanding to speak with you specifically, and when she told them you were no longer with the company, 2 of them asked for immediate contract reviews. Mr. Davidson is furious." Richard Davidson was Pinnacle CEO, the man who built the company from a small startup into a regional powerhouse. He understood the value of client relationships better than anyone, which made his decision to support my termination even more puzzling. "Thanks for letting me know, Jennifer, but I can't get involved in internal company matters," I said carefully. "I'm sure they'll figure it out." But privately, I was starting to understand the bigger picture. My termination hadn't been Richard's decision. It had come from Meridian Global, the parent company that was implementing efficiency improvements across all their acquisitions. Sarah had probably been brought in specifically to reduce personnel costs and streamline operations, regardless of the impact on client relationships. The problem was that efficiency and relationship management don't always align. You can't optimize trust through automation. You can't streamline personal connections through standard operating procedures. And you can't transfer a decade of relationship equity to someone who views clients as data points on a spreadsheet. That weekend, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of immediately jumping into job interviews with other large agencies, I called Tom Mitchell, a former colleague who left Pinnacle 3 years earlier to start his own boutique marketing firm. Marcus Thompson. Tom's voice was warm with genuine pleasure. "I heard through the grapevine about what happened. Pinnacle's loss, for sure. What can I do for you?" Tom's company, Apex Marketing Partners, was everything that Pinnacle used to be before the corporate acquisition. Small, agile, focused on building genuine partnerships with clients rather than managing them through systems and processes. They had 12 employees, 15 clients, and a reputation for providing the kind of personal attention that larger agencies couldn't match. "I'm exploring options," I said carefully, "wondering if you might have room for someone with my background." Tom laughed. "Room? Marcus, I've been trying to figure out how to compete with you for years. Having you join our team would be like acquiring 10 years of relationship expertise overnight. When can we meet?" We met Monday morning at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek, halfway between his office and my house. Tom was everything that Sarachin wasn't: relaxed, personable, genuinely interested in understanding client needs rather than optimizing operational efficiency. "Here's what I can offer," he said after we discussed the basics. "Senior partner position, equity stake, full autonomy over your client relationships, and the resources to serve them the way they deserve to be served. No corporate bureaucracy, no efficiency mandates, no one telling you that personal attention is inefficient." The offer was compelling, but I had one major concern. "Tom, I'm going to be honest with you. I suspect that several of my former clients are going to be looking for new representation in the next few weeks. If I join your firm and they decide to follow me, we need to handle that transition ethically and professionally." Tom nodded seriously. "Absolutely. We don't poach clients, we earn them. If they choose to work with us because of their existing relationship with you, that's their decision, but we do everything by the book." That afternoon, I officially accepted Tom's offer to join Apex Marketing Partners as a senior partner. I would start the following Monday, giving me exactly 1 week to transition from unemployed to business owner. It felt like the right move, both professionally and personally. At Apex, I could return to the relationship-focused approach that had made me successful without corporate oversight telling me that personal attention was inefficient. Meanwhile, Sarah's situation at Pinnacle was deteriorating rapidly. Jennifer called again Tuesday morning with an update that made my decision feel even more justified. "For more clients requested contract reviews yesterday," she reported. "Hartwell Industries formally notified us that they're exercising their 30-day evaluation period. Mountain View Medical did the same thing. Sarah's blaming you, saying you must have sabotaged the relationships on your way out." I felt a flash of anger at that accusation, but quickly suppressed it. "Jennifer, I haven't contacted any of my former clients since leaving Pinnacle. I've maintained complete professional boundaries." "I know," she said. "Everyone here knows." Sarah's just panicking because she didn't realize how much these clients valued their personal relationship with you. She thought she could just take over your accounts like inherited furniture. The truth was, I didn't need to sabotage anything. Sarah was managing that all by herself. According to Jennifer, she'd already made several critical mistakes that demonstrated her fundamental misunderstanding of relationship management. She'd tried to implement new reporting procedures that doubled the administrative burden on clients. She'd scheduled mandatory optimization meetings to review account efficiency without considering client preferences or schedules. Most damaging of all, she dismissed several client concerns as resistance to change, implying that their feedback wasn't valuable. These weren't malicious decisions. They were the natural result of applying corporate efficiency models to relationship-based business. Sarah was doing exactly what she'd been hired to do, optimize operations. The problem was that optimization and personalization are often mutually exclusive. Wednesday brought the call I'd been expecting. Margaret Chun from Hartwell Industries. But this time her tone was different. Not frustrated or confused, but determined and decisive. "Marcus, I'll get straight to the point. Hartwell Industries is terminating our contract with Pinnacle Marketing, effective immediately. Their new approach doesn't align with our needs or expectations. We're looking for a new agency partner, and we'd like to discuss working with you directly." I explained my new position at Apex Marketing Partners, emphasizing that any decision to work with us should be based on our capabilities and approach, not just our previous relationship. Margaret laughed. "Marcus, we worked together for 8 years. I know your capabilities better than any proposal could demonstrate. The question isn't whether you can handle our account. It's whether your new firm can support the kind of partnership we're looking for." That afternoon, I arranged a meeting between Margaret and Tom Mitchell, not to pitch our services, but to let her evaluate whether Apex was the right fit for Hartwell's needs. Tom understood the importance of this decision, both for Hartwell and for our company. Landing a $1.2 million account would transform Apex from a small boutique firm into a serious regional competitor. The meeting went perfectly. Tom and Margaret connected immediately, sharing the same values around relationship-based service and collaborative partnership. More importantly, Margaret could see that Apex's smaller size and flexible structure would allow for the kind of personalized attention that had been disappearing at Pinnacle under corporate management. By Friday, We had a signed contract with Hartwell Industries. Tom was ecstatic, but I felt more relief than celebration. Relief that Margaret's company would continue to receive the kind of service they deserved. Relief that the relationship we'd built over 8 years wouldn't be destroyed by corporate efficiency mandates. But Margaret wasn't the only client reaching out. Over the next 2 weeks, I received calls from 6 other former clients, all expressing dissatisfaction with the transition process at Pinnacle and interest in exploring alternatives. Each conversation followed the same pattern: frustration with new procedures, concern about loss of personal attention, and disappointment that their feedback was being dismissed as resistance to change. I handled each inquiry with complete professionalism, explaining my new position and suggesting they evaluate Apex based on our capabilities rather than our previous relationship. But the message was clear. Clients don't just hire agencies, they hire people. And when you remove the people they trust, you lose a relationship regardless of contract terms. 3 weeks after my termination, Tom and I were working late in our office when my personal phone rang. Sarah Chen's name appeared on the caller ID. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Marcus, thank you for taking my call." Sarah's voice was strained with obvious stress. "I think we need to talk about the client transition issues we've been experiencing." "I'm not sure what there is to discuss," I replied carefully. "I'm no longer involved with Pinnacle's client relationships." "That's exactly the problem," Sarah said, her professional composure starting to crack. 5 major clients have terminated their contracts in the past 2 weeks. They're all citing relationship management concerns, and several specifically mention wanting to continue working with you personally. I remained silent, letting her continue. "Look, I may have underestimated the personal relationship factor in these accounts. Maybe we moved too quickly on the transition. Would you consider coming back? We could restructure your position, give you more autonomy, increase your compensation." The offer was tempting from a purely financial perspective. Returning to Pinnacle would mean higher base salary, better benefits, and the security of a larger organization. But it would also mean working under Sarah's management, submitting to corporate efficiency mandates, and abandoning the partnership opportunity at Apex. "I appreciate the offer, Sarah, but I'm committed to my new position. If Pinnacle's clients are unhappy with their service, that's something you'll need to address through improved account management." "Improved account management?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "Marcus, these clients are being completely unreasonable. They expect constant personal attention, customized reporting, individual treatment that's impossible to scale across a large client base. They need to understand that modern agencies operate differently." And there it was, the fundamental disconnect that had been obvious from our first meeting. Sarah still believed that client expectations were the problem, not her approach to managing them. She was trying to force relationship-based clients into a systems-based model, then blaming them when it didn't work. "Sarah, these clients aren't being unreasonable. They're being consistent. They hired Pinnacle because of the personal attention and customized service they received. If you can't provide that anymore, they'll find someone who can." "Is that what you're doing?" she asked, her voice turning cold. "Providing them with what they can't get from us?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm providing the same relationship-focused service I've always provided. The clients who choose to work with Apex are making that decision based on their evaluation of our capabilities and approach." After we hung up, Tom looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Your former boss?" I nodded, trying to understand why clients are leaving. "Did you enlighten her?" I shrugged. "Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be experienced." The next month brought a steady stream of departures from Pinnacle, not just my former clients, but other accounts that were dissatisfied with the new corporate approach. Word was spreading through Denver's business community about the changes at Pinnacle, and many companies were reevaluating their agency relationships. Meanwhile, Apex was growing rapidly. We'd added 3 new team members to handle the increased client load, moved to a larger office space, and established partnerships with specialized vendors to support our expanded capabilities. Tom was handling the operational growth, while I focused on client relationship management and new business development. The transformation was remarkable. In 6 months, we'd grown from a small boutique firm to a legitimate competitor in the regional market. Our client roster included some of the most respected companies in Denver, and our reputation for personalized service was attracting attention from businesses that had previously worked with larger agencies. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Richard Davidson, Pinnacle CEO, called me directly on a Thursday afternoon in November. "Marcus, I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "The decision to eliminate your position was a mistake, and I should have recognized that before it was too late." I waited for him to continue. "We've lost 8 major clients in the past 6 months, representing nearly $3 million in annual revenue. Our client satisfaction scores have dropped by 40%, and our employee retention rate is at an all-time low. The efficiency improvements that Meridian Global insisted on have been devastating to our business model." "I'm sorry to hear that, Richard. Pinnacle was a great company for a long time." "It still could be," he said. "That's why I'm calling. I want to discuss the possibility of Apex and Pinnacle forming a partnership, maybe even a merger. Your relationship-focused approach, combined with our operational infrastructure, could be powerful." The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months earlier, Pinnacle had fired me for being too relationship-dependent. Now they wanted to merge with my new company because relationship management was exactly what they'd lost. Tom and I spent several weeks evaluating Richard's proposal. Financially, it was attractive. Operationally, it would give us access to resources and capabilities that would take years to develop independently. But strategically, it felt like a step backward. "We've built something special here," Tom said during one of our planning sessions. "We've proven that the relationship-focused model works, that clients value personal attention over operational efficiency. Do we really want to integrate back into a corporate structure that fundamentally misunderstands that?" He was right. Apex's success wasn't just about client relationships. It was about company culture. We created an environment where personal attention and customized service weren't just tolerated, they were celebrated. Joining with Pinnacle, even as equal partners, would compromise that culture. We politely declined Richard's merger proposal, but suggested strategic partnership where Apex could handle relationship-intensive clients while Pinnacle focused on larger corporate accounts that preferred systematic approaches. It was a way for both companies to play to their strengths without forcing incompatible business models together. A year after my termination, I was attending the Denver Marketing Association's annual awards dinner when I spotted Sarah Chin across the room. She was talking with several industry colleagues, but her body language suggested professional stress rather than social networking. According to industry gossip, she'd left Pinnacle 6 months earlier to take a position with a national consulting firm. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded ballroom. I nodded politely. She nodded back, and that was the extent of our interaction. There was no animosity, no desire for confrontation. She'd made decisions based on her experience and training, just as I had. The fact that our approaches were incompatible didn't make either of us wrong, just different. Later that evening, during the award ceremony, Apex Marketing Partners was recognized as Small Agency of the Year for our client retention rate and business growth. As I accepted the award on behalf of our team, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. 18 months earlier, I'd been fired for being too relationship-dependent, too focused on personal connections, too resistant to operational efficiency. Tonight, I was being honored for exactly those same qualities. The difference wasn't in my approach. It was in finding an environment where that approach was valued. During my acceptance speech, I kept the focus on our team and our clients, but I couldn't resist one observation that felt particularly relevant. In our industry, we often talk about the importance of understanding our clients' needs and exceeding their expectations. But understanding and exceeding aren't operational functions, they're relationship functions. They require personal attention, individual consideration, and genuine care about outcomes rather than just deliverables. At Apex, we've learned that efficiency and personalization aren't mutually exclusive. They're mutually reinforcing when you build them on a foundation of trust. After the ceremony, several people approached me with congratulations and questions about our business model. But the conversation that meant the most came from Margaret Chun, who'd driven down from Fort Collins specifically to attend the dinner. "I wanted to be here tonight," she explained, "because this award represents more than just business success. It represents a value of treating clients as partners rather than accounts, of building relationships rather than just managing contracts. Margaret, you've been part of this journey from the beginning. Hartwell's willingness to take a chance on a small firm made all the difference. She smiled. Marcus, we didn't take a chance on a small firm. We followed someone we trusted to a place where that trust would be honored. There's a difference. As Emma and I drove home that night, my daughter asked about the award and what it meant for our future. It means we built something sustainable. I explained. Something based on treating people well and delivering value, rather than just optimizing processes. So you're glad you got fired? She asked with teenage directness. I thought about that for a moment. I'm glad I ended up where I am. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes a catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. That sounds like something you put on a motivational poster. Emma laughed. Maybe, but it's also true. Today, Apex Marketing Partners employs 23 people and serves 37 clients across Colorado and Wyoming. We've maintained our relationship-focused approach while building the operational capabilities needed to serve larger accounts. Most importantly, we've proven that personal attention and business growth aren't competing priorities, they're complementary strategies. Sarah Chen's prediction that relationship-dependent business models couldn't scale turned out to be wrong, but only because she defined scale incorrectly. We didn't scale by reducing personal attention. We scaled by hiring people who understood the value of personal attention and giving them the resources to provide it effectively. 3 weeks ago, I received a LinkedIn message from a former Pinnacle colleague who'd stayed with the company through all the changes. Marcus, thought you want to know that Pinnacle was just acquired again, this time by a firm that specializes in relationship marketing. The new owner specifically mentioned wanting to return to the personal service model that made Pinnacle successful in the first place. Richard Davidson is back as CEO, and they're actively recruiting account managers who understand client relationship development. Funny how things come full circle. It was funny, but not surprising. In business, as in life, foundational principles have a way of reasserting themselves regardless of temporary trends or management philosophies. Relationships matter. Trust matters. Personal attention matters. These aren't old-fashioned concepts that need to be updated for modern efficiency. They're timeless principles that create sustainable success. I never did reach out to Sarah Chen to share this perspective, and I never heard from her again after that brief encounter at the awards dinner. But I hope she eventually learned what I learned during those difficult months after my termination, that being fired for your strengths isn't a failure. It's a redirection toward an environment where those strengths will be valued. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to your career is being told you don't fit somewhere you were never supposed to be in the first place.